Back then, every afternoon in our peaceful suburban home in Oregon, the small kitchen was always filled with the scent of almond cookies baking and soft jazz from the old radio. My mom wore her sky-blue apron stirring batter while softly humming along to the melody. I sat on the high stool by the counter, legs swinging, watching the sunlight slant across her face, always radiant like the morning light. To me, the world needed nothing more than that. Every evening, Dad would return from his law office downtown, kiss Mom on the forehead, then lift me into the air like I was the most precious thing he'd ever held. Dinner was always warm, full of laughter, random stories, and something that felt a lot like happiness. I thought it would always be that way, until the coughing began. At night, it got so bad she had to lean against pillows just to breathe. It started with mild fatigue, but then she grew thinner, dark circles under her eyes deepened, and her voice turned faint. I still remember that winter night when I was 8. The wind howling past the window panes, while inside, I woke to muffled sobs in the living room. Quietly, I crept out and hid behind the staircase. That's when I saw Dad kneeling before her, his hands gripping hers, like letting go would make her vanish right in front of him. "It's late stage now. There's not much time left, Marcus." The doctor's voice came through the speakerphone, low, but sharp enough to cut through my small chest like ice. I didn't understand everything he said, but I knew something had shifted. Irreversibly. What followed felt like a movie stuck in fast forward. Chemotherapy drained her strength until she could no longer get out of bed. Her hair thinned, yet she still smiled whenever I entered the room. She still raised a trembling hand to stroke my hair, even when her eyes had lost their light. "Don't be scared, my little girl. I'm still here. I'll always be here." Those words, I clung to them. Desperately. Naively. That spring she passed away on a morning cloaked in fog. I remember running home from school, only to find Dad sitting silently on the porch, clutching the handkerchief she used to carry. He said nothing, just handed me an old photo. The one of all three of us laughing in a lavender field. "Mom's gone, Maya." I didn't cry right then. I just stood there frozen. The wind cutting through my coat didn't sting nearly as much as the gaping hole suddenly torn open in my chest. The days after that turned the house hauntingly silent. No more jazz. No more cookies. Just Dad's tired footsteps and the dull clatter of dishes in the sink. He buried himself in work like someone on the run. Left before dawn. Came home long after I was asleep. Nannies came and went, each one a stranger. I eventually learned to tie my own shoelaces and make cold sandwiches with sliced cheese for breakfast. "You're such a strong little girl," one babysitter once said, her eyes soft with pity. I just nodded. I didn't want to be strong. I just wanted my mom back. I started forming strange habits, sleeping in her old shirt, sitting inside the closet for hours, breathing in the faint trace of her perfume. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart leapt, though reason told me no miracle was coming. I still went to school, did my homework, smiled when teachers asked how I was. But something inside me had cracked. I wasn't the same child anymore. I was Maya, an 8-year-old girl in a house echoing with absence and filled with holes no one could fix. And even though I didn't know where life would lead, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The summer I turned 9, Dad brought me to a fundraising gala hosted by the Oregon Bar Association. Wearing the pale blue dress Mom had sewn, I sat quietly at a large table, draped in white linen, gripping a glass of orange juice, while grown-ups laughed around me like grief didn't exist. I hated it all, until she walked in. Elaine Monroe, slender with soft golden waves and eyes like misted gray glass. She wore a deep purple satin dress, a string of pearls around her collar, and moved like she owned the floor beneath her. My dad, standing with colleagues, turned to look. That look. I recognized it. He once looked at my mom like that. Elaine approached my table, sat across from me, and smiled, a perfectly polished smile crafted for events like this. "So you're Maya." Her voice was as gentle as background music. "I've heard a lot about you." I nodded, silent. "Your mother was a wonderful woman. I'm very sorry for what you've been through." That was the first thing she ever said to me. Polite. Appropriate. Empty. 3 months later, she moved into our home with her daughter Madison. Madison was 1 year older than me, with shiny blonde hair and sparkling blue eyes, like the dolls in downtown Portland's boutique displays. She brought 3 suitcases of clothes, 2 totes of children's cosmetics, and a portable bookshelf that quickly transformed the guest room into her creative space. Dad gave her my old bedroom, the biggest one upstairs, with a window overlooking the garden. I was moved to the small sitting room behind the staircase originally used for storage. Just for now, Mia, he said, as he helped fold my blanket. We'll sort things out soon. That sorting never happened. Elaine filled every corner of the house in no time. She replaced Mom's curtains, took down all the old photos in the hallway, and hung professionally staged portraits of the new family. One day I came home from the library and noticed the only framed picture of Mom in the living room was gone. It doesn't match the room's color scheme, Elaine said when I asked. Madison quickly became the center of every dinner conversation. She took horseback riding lessons, on weekends ballet at a prestigious academy, and went shopping with her mom at least once a week. She needs a new dress for the fall recital, Elaine explained, as my dad handed over his credit card. When I asked for a set of acrylic brushes to finish my canvas painting project, Elaine placed a hand on my shoulder, her eyes filled with a kind of fake gentleness. Painting is a lovely hobby, Maya. But not right now. Madison needs to be prioritized. She's performing in front of a big crowd. Every one of my needs, from sketchbooks, extra tutoring, to the school's field trip, was pushed aside with the same phrase, not right now. Madison had her birthday at an event center, complete with a magician and a 3-tiered cake. Mine took place in the kitchen with a small homemade tart and 4 leftover candles from the year before. Elaine never raised her voice or did anything blatant. She simply distributed affection with quiet precision, like a strategy drawn up in advance. Gradually, I became an outsider in my own home. Dad no longer sat with me every night to check homework like he used to. Instead, he'd often be in the living room listening to Madison bang out random keys on the piano. She's got potential, don't you hear it? He said to Elaine, full of hope. I know, she replied, resting her head on his shoulder, her eyes drifting toward me, standing silently in the kitchen. I learned to go quiet. Whatever I needed, I figured out how to get it myself. I cleaned the school library after hours to earn old books, collected cans to trade for a few bucks to buy cheap art supplies. Every time I finished a painting, I rolled it up and hid it under my bed, tucking away pieces of my dream where no one could crush them. I didn't hate Madison, but I couldn't trust her either. Behind her polite front was a wicked curiosity. Once she sneaked into my room and shredded a painting I'd spent a week working on. Claimed the cat jumped on the table. Elaine didn't investigate. Dad said nothing. One evening, while I was washing dishes, Elaine paused at the kitchen door, voice low and calm. Maya, you need to learn to adapt. Life changes. This family has changed. You need to understand that. I didn't respond. My hand clenched the glass in the sink so tightly I nearly shattered it. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a stage, and I was only playing a supporting role in someone else's script. I used to think the greatest pain was losing my mother. But now I knew worse than loss was being slowly erased by the living. I looked up at my reflection in the kitchen window, a quiet face, eyes stripped of innocence, and a determination beginning to harden in my chest. If they didn't want me to be part of this family, I'd stop trying to be. From that moment, I started to change. High school passed by like someone fast-forwarded through my life, skipping all the parts most people hold dear: birthday parties, family vacations, late-night study sessions, with someone waiting up for you. For me, they were just long, silent gaps. Elaine never needed to yell. She built the image of a devoted stepmother while quietly withdrawing everything from my reach: attention, support, my father's trust. Anytime I asked for extra art classes, she'd tilt her head, smile politely, and turn to my dad. I think Maya's avoiding her responsibilities at home. She should be helping out a little more. One time I forgot to clear my plate after dinner because I was finishing a presentation. Madison pointed at the dishes and sighed, so she doesn't have to do anything just because she's the dreamy artist. Elaine said nothing. She just laid a hand on Madison's shoulder and praised her. My daughter's so observant. That was enough. Poison didn't need to shout. I slowly became a stranger in the house, even though I still lived under its roof. Everything I did was scrutinized and spun negatively. If I stayed quiet during dinner, they said I was cold. If I spoke up, I was called rude or defiant. I learned to say, "Little do more," and vanish at the right time. Dad still called me my little girl on special occasions, like when I was chosen to represent my school in a statewide design competition. He showed up that day, third row, clapped the longest when I won. His eyes made me soften, made me think maybe I still mattered. But when I brought up applying to the Art Institute in Chicago, Elaine gently set her teacup down. I heard that school's tuition is quite high. Madison's preparing for college, too. We should think this through. Dad hesitated. He looked at me like he wanted to apologize but couldn't find the words. In the end, I chose a public college in Eugene, Oregon, far enough to breathe, close enough to return if he ever needed me. I worked at a bookstore to cover bills, lived on instant noodles to save for brushes. Life wasn't easy, but it was mine. No one could touch it. I stopped calling home. Every phone conversation centered on Madison. She just got an internship at a law firm. She's going to Italy with classmates. She has a perfect GPA. And me, no one asked. In my sophomore year, while preparing my first solo exhibition, I got a text from an unknown number: "Call your stepmother." Urgent. I thought it was a mistake until the third call came. Elaine didn't cry. Her voice was flat, steady. "Your father had a heart attack in his office. They tried, but he didn't make it." I froze in the dorm hallway, the phone dropping from my hand without me realizing. By the time I arrived at the hospital in Portland, he was already in the morgue. Elaine stood in a black coat, eyes red but not swollen, standing beside Madison like a lead actress keeping control of the scene. "You should have come sooner," Madison said softly, avoiding my eyes. I didn't reply. No one offered me real condolences. No one asked how I felt losing the only person left who'd known me since birth. At the funeral, I sat in the second row behind Elaine and Madison. The photo of Dad on the stand didn't include me, just him, Elaine, and Madison from a beach trip I was never invited to. The will was read a week later. Downtown law firm, polished wooden floors, cold lights. The majority of the estate will go to his current wife, Mrs. Elaine Monroe Whitmore, the lawyer read. Miss Madison Monroe will receive 3 real estate properties and 2 academic trusts. I was mentioned last like a footnote. To Maya Whitmore, a sum equivalent to $18,000 to support tuition and living expenses during college. Elaine let out a quiet sigh, as if everything had wrapped up neatly. "Your father wanted you to learn independence, Maya. Madison needs more support, you understand that." I didn't react. I didn't question or argue. I just stood, picked up my bag, and walked out. It was drizzling outside. Portland looked like it had just buried something unnamed. $18,000. After 20 years living in that man's house. It wasn't about the money. It was the clarity. Between words of love and acts of love, he chose absence. He chose not to protect me. He chose to let me go. I returned to Eugene in silence. No one saw me off. No one called to ask if I'd made it back safely. That very night I withdrew the entire inheritance and submitted a scholarship application to an art school in Massachusetts. Even with only a 7% chance, I had to try. Not to prove anything to Elaine. Not to make Madison jealous. But to prove to myself that I could escape what once pulled me down. The train heading north cut through the night. Outside, pine forests stretched on endlessly. Inside me was an old question that had never found an answer. If I no longer belonged to anyone, then who would I become? I didn't have a clear answer. Only one thing felt certain: I wasn't going to look back again. I came home one afternoon in March, after a 3-hour bus ride from Eugene to Portland. In my backpack were a few clothes, a copy of my father's death certificate, and a folder from the lawyer documents confirming the inheritance barely covered 3 more semesters of college tuition. The White House, with its rose trellis out front, looked the same. But the air had changed. I rang the bell. Madison opened the door with her usual lightly made-up face and familiar cold stare. "Oh, you're back. I thought you had that independent life you were so proud of." I didn't answer, just walked in. A few steps later, I stopped in the hallway where family photos used to hang. Now it was empty. Nothing left. Nothing of Dad. Elaine was in the living room, porcelain teacup in hand, her eyes glancing at me like I was an uninvited guest. "Mia, you came at the right time," she said, setting her cup down. "We need to talk." I stood still, my coat still on. "Marcus loved you deeply. But he's no longer here. You're grown now, you can take care of yourself." I said nothing. Elaine continued her tone, even like reading a rehearsed statement. "This house belongs to me, per the will. Other assets have already been clearly distributed. Madison is still in college and needs a stable place to thrive. You might want to find somewhere more suitable for your circumstances." I don't remember how tightly I gripped my backpack strap, just that my fingers went numb. "You mean I need to move out?" I asked, eyes fixed on the teacup on the table. "This isn't a need," Elaine smiled. "It's more of a should. You have to learn to stand on your own feet. That's also what your father wanted when he left you that portion of the estate to help you begin a new journey in every sense." I looked at her at how casually she invoked your father, as if he were just a clause signed on a power of attorney. No dinner invitation. No suggestion to stay a few days. Not the slightest hesitation. I went up to my old room, now Madison's treadmill corner and vanity space. My room had disappeared like it had never existed. A few cardboard boxes with my belongings sat at the bottom of the stairs, neatly tied up like a parcel awaiting pickup. I carried them one by one down the front steps. No one helped. No one asked where I was going. As I closed the trunk of a last-minute taxi, I called through an app Elaine, stepped out onto the porch, arms folded. "Good luck, Maya. Just don't let your art dreams blind you to the reality that the world isn't kind to daydreamers." I looked up. The late afternoon sun reflected off the pearl necklace around her neck, the one Dad gave Mom on their 10th wedding anniversary. "You should learn not to let your mouth say things your hands already disproved," I replied, then got in the car. The driver asked where I was headed. I gave the address of my old dorm in Eugene. "But isn't the semester break on now?" he asked. "I just need a place to go back to. What comes after I haven't figured out." I turned toward the window, watching the house fade behind me. Like a stage closing its curtain final, and with no lines left for a supporting role. The following week, I slept on a couch in the dorm's common room. The staff allowed it temporarily while I looked for cheaper housing near campus. I picked up 2 extra shifts per week at the bookstore and waited tables in the evenings at a tiny Italian restaurant down the street. I bought sketch paper and paints from a second-hand shop, redid my full-ride scholarship application to Massachusetts. In the Guardian or emergency contact section, I left it blank. One night, after clearing the last table, I sat alone in the restaurant's back patio, chewing on a cold slice of cheese bread. The manager, a Cuban woman named Luisa, brought me a cup of hot tea and placed it next to me. "You didn't eat much today." I nodded slightly. "Still hungry? No. I'm just not used to not having someone to go home to." Luisa didn't ask more. She just sat beside me. Her hands were calloused, her eyes lined with deep creases. But her gaze was warm. Sometimes the ones born without a family to choose must build one of their own. I moved to Seattle after graduation, carrying a few unsold paintings and a suitcase with a broken handle. The city had a lot of rain, but it wasn't as cold as Portland. I rented an attic room in a 3-story wooden house in Capitol Hill. The window faced red-tiled roofs and balcony string lights. In the mornings, I worked at Westbridge Gallery, an art space on Pine Street that featured independent artists. At night, I made coffee at a late-night cafe filled with customers who all spoke through earbuds and wireless laptops. I hung my paintings on my apartment wall next to old newspaper clippings from student exhibitions. No one walked in to admire them, but they stayed as silent witnesses to the days I refused to disappear. One April afternoon, while jotting notes for a new exhibit, the gallery door opened. I turned around and saw a tall man in a simple black coat, his face unfamiliar but unmistakable, with a composed grace and eyes that seemed to observe before speaking. He stopped in front of Eva Langston's paintings, a young artist exploring themes of memory and confined spaces. "Impressive," he said as I approached. "The way she plays with depth is bold." "Eva was locked in her stepmother's storage room as a child," I replied, eyes fixed on the canvas. "She turned suffocating space into shifting forms." He nodded, then turned to me. "Are you the manager here, assistant curator? But also the one who knows every paint splatter on the floor?" He smiled. His hazel eyes carried a warmth that was rare. Before leaving, he handed me a business card. I glanced down Nathan Cole Revox Innovations. I had read about him. The mind behind advanced audio processing tech used in medical devices. Named one of 40 under 40 by Entrepreneur magazine. But what stayed with me wasn't his R-sum, it was the way he listened when I spoke about color streaks on canvas. We met again on a Saturday morning over espresso and almond butter toast at a small cafe near Lake Union. At first we talked art, then music, documentaries, sleepless nights, instant noodles for dinner, no grand gestures, no business cards, no CEO title. Just Nathan across the table listening intently as I shared about the art therapy program I was preparing for kids on the autism spectrum. He didn't dig into my past or push me to explain the empty emergency contact field on every form. Maybe because he'd been the only son of blue-collar parents. Maybe because he knew what it meant to build a life from scratch with no safety net. We came to know each other through simple dinners, lakeside walks, and conversations that didn't need background music to fill the silence. I once thought I could never love again, at least not in a way that felt whole. But one summer night, I came home late in the drizzle, and there he was sitting on my porch steps with a bag of pizza, his shirt soaked through. He didn't say a word. That's when I knew. He proposed with a single question. No roses. No diamond ring. "Do you want to keep walking down unfamiliar roads with me?" We had a small wedding in his mother's backyard in Spokane. No floor-length gown, no celebrity singer. Just a white dress I designed myself, 60 guests, all Nathan's close friends and family. I didn't send invitations to anyone from Portland. No one from the old family knew I got married. I didn't want Madison or Elaine to find out. Not out shame. Just because I no longer needed them to validate my growth. Nathan understood. He never pressured me to reconnect with anyone. Instead, he built a new circle for me to step into, a small home in Queen Anne, a kitchen stocked with spices I couldn't name, a balcony filled with lavender plants I'd loved since childhood. I continued working at the gallery. He never asked me to quit, even though his stock dividends could have easily covered our expenses. "Because you need to live your life on your own terms, not on the privileges I can offer," he said when I mentioned starting the art therapy classes. I nodded. That was enough. We lived like that for 2 years. No social media showmanship. No press releases. No CEO's wife headlines. Just the two of us, a girl once pushed out of her home, and a man patient enough to wait for her each time she wandered. I thought the past had closed behind me. Then one day in the mailbox, I found a thick cream-colored envelope embossed in silver, the Whitmore Family Foundation Annual Gala for Children's Health. I stood there for a long time staring at the slanted signature at the bottom. "Hope we can reconnect. Elaine." My hands trembled slightly. Nathan stepped outside and saw the envelope in my grasp. His eyes flickered with concern. I looked at him. "They don't know who I am, do they?" He paused. "This year's gala is anonymously sponsored by Revox. They don't know I'm behind it. And they definitely don't know you're my wife." I let out a soft, cold laugh. A quiet script began forming in my mind, not for revenge, not for validation, but to finally stand in front of them on my own 2 feet without needing anyone's permission. The invitation lay atop a stack of coupons and flyers, placed as if someone made sure I'd notice it first. The cover shimmered with Silver Leaf Annual Gala to benefit St. Clair Children's Hospital, hosted by Elaine Whitmore. I sat on the doorstep, slowly tracing the faded ink of her signature "Hope you'll come. Family still misses you." Family. A word so absurd it burned. I placed the invitation on the kitchen counter, ready to toss it in the trash. Then Nathan came home. When he spotted Whitmore Foundation on the envelope, his face changed. "St. Clair is one of the hospital's Revox funds," he said carefully. "I should have known Elaine was the organizer. I don't blame you. She's good at hiding what benefits her image." Nathan stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then his gaze met mine, measured, knowing. "Do you want to go?" I leaned on the table. "Go to hear her wish me luck in a room full of donors, or to feel their pity in every handshake?" "Not for them," Nathan said, voice steady. "For you." I didn't answer. But that night I sat for hours by the window, tea gone cold, mapping out images in my head like chess moves. 3 weeks later, I walked into the Fairmont Queen Elizabeth Hotel downtown in a square-neck black dress, simple but flawlessly tailored by an independent designer I once featured at the gallery. My hair was pinned low, lips in muted wine. No necklace. No name tags. I didn't need accessories to speak for me. The ballroom gleamed. Heels clinked against marble glasses, chimed like an unsung symphony of reinvention. My name tag read, Maya Cole, no maiden name. No misses. I walked the central aisle between rows of ivory-draped tables, eyes skimming familiar Portland elites, the mayor's wife, a regional TV executive, oil magnate heiresses. And then Madison, blonde hair, tied high crimson dress, screaming for attention. She saw me. Surprise flashed across her face. Then she leaned toward Elaine, whispering something just loud enough for me to hear the hush that followed. Elaine turned around, her half-smile looking rehearsed. She stepped toward me, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear clearly. "Maya, I didn't think you'd actually come. It's been a while. I'm not quite sure what you're doing these days, or where you're currently working." A few tables nearby erupted in polite laughter. I pressed my lips together, eyes fixed on her. "Looks like the kitchen staff could use a tray runner." Madison chimed in, a glass of white wine in her hand. I nodded slightly. "You're right. Kindness around here could definitely use a good cleanup." Elaine raised an eyebrow. Without a word, she signaled. A security guard in a black suit walked toward me. "I'm sorry," she said sweetly. Her voice dipped in sugar, but it seems someone is unfamiliar with protocol. "The gala is a private event for honored guests and sponsors only." I looked directly at the guard and calmly pulled a cream-colored invitation from my handbag. "This is a formal invitation, signed by the event's host. If that's not enough, I can call my husband to clarify." Elaine chuckled, a deliberate mocking sound. "Oh, you're married? Is he real or another starving artist you picked up at a student exhibition?" Laughter around us grew louder. Someone raised their phone and started recording. "We don't need drama here." Elaine turned to the guard. "Escort her out. Kindly. We wouldn't want to ruin the fundraiser." The guard placed a hand on my arm. I didn't resist. Didn't cry. Just said quietly, "If you want to know who tonight's lead sponsor is, maybe wait a few more minutes." He led me to the edge of the ballroom under dozens of amused stares, watching like an audience awaiting a show. Madison followed, still recording. "Hope you got your angle right. Might make a great post-washed-up stepdaughter." I turned to her, smiling gently. "You might want to stop filming now before something unexpected walks into frame." At that moment, the main entrance across the room opened. Nathan walked, in black tuxedo, charcoal gray tie, calm, as if he'd just left a leadership summit. The moment he spotted me, he picked up pace and crossed the ballroom. Voices quieted. Phones lowered. Elaine turned. Madison frowned. No one laughed now. Nathan stopped in front of me and gently took my purse from the guard. "Sorry I'm late," he whispered, just for me. Then he turned to Elaine. "Mrs. Whitmore, I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Nathan Cole, CEO of Revox Innovations." Tonight's principal sponsor. Elaine's face drained of color. Madison stepped back. She's my wife, he stated clearly. Anyone who just insulted her just lost any chance of receiving another cent from my foundation. No one breathed. I stood tall. The years of being cast aside, the hunger for belonging, the exhaustion from pushing forward, were now all standing here with me on this polished wood floor, demanding recognition. And the crowd looked at me, not as an outcast, but like they'd just missed something they'd soon regret. The grand room went utterly silent. No music, no clinking glasses, no heels on hardwood. Just Nathan's voice, steady and sharp as cut steel. My wife was invited here under false pretenses, only to be humiliated by the same woman who once dismissed her in her own home. His gaze swept across Elaine, then landed on Madison, her eyes now unsteady, phone trembling like she wanted to end the recording, but knew it was too late. Elaine forced a weak smile, trying to salvage a shred of her fading poise. Nathan, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I had no idea Maya was my wife. He cut her off, face unmoving. Then you should ask yourself why that fact made you treat her like a burden. The question dropped like ink in a glass of white wine. A bank executive nearby took a subtle step back. A local journalist quietly stopped recording. Everyone exchanged glances, watching to see who would clap or leave first. We didn't mean to hurt Maya, Elaine murmured, avoiding eye contact. There may have been a mix-up at the reception. Nathan turned to the security guard still standing near me. Were you instructed to escort my wife out? The guard nodded, his face reddening. I was just following Mrs. Whitmore's orders, sir. Then remember this, at our next Revox-sponsored event, we'll bring our own security team. I have no need for staff who follow the wrong orders without thinking. The guard bowed his head. A rebuke light enough not to destroy, but heavy enough to haunt him. Elaine pressed her lips together. Madison raised her chin, regaining a sliver of poise. Maya seems to enjoy theatrics. Shows up to a major event and suddenly becomes queen of the room. Convenient. Not everyone gets to turn marriage into a revenge strategy. I smiled softly, meeting her eyes. If you think standing beside someone who loves you is a strategy, maybe you should reevaluate what happiness means. Madison turned her face away. The crowd began murmuring. A woman near the planning committee whispered to her friend, eyes still fixed on me. Nathan looked around the room, his voice lower now, but somehow louder than any microphone. For those who may not know, I'm the one behind the anonymous donation to St. Clair Children's Hospital. The funds helped expand the neonatal intensive care unit and upgrade the specialized therapy rooms. But if this place has become a stage for veiled humiliation and discrimination, then maybe we chose the wrong partner. A quiet gasp escaped from the left side of the hall, an involuntary reaction. We always believed the Whitmore Foundation was a humanitarian organization, said a member of the hospital's executive board, eyes locked on Elaine. But perhaps it's time we reconsider how it's run and by whom. Elaine gripped her wineglass so tightly, I thought it might shatter in her hand. She turned toward me, whispering furiously, You should be ashamed for turning personal drama into a public spectacle. I stepped half a pace closer, just enough to make her tilt her head to meet my eyes. You've been doing that to me for years. In front of others. At dinner. At funerals. You turned me into a shadow next to your biological daughter. But today, I didn't come to revisit the past. I came to end it. Publicly. Elaine said nothing. Her shoulders tensed like overtuned violin strings. Nathan turned to the event organizers. Revox will continue supporting St. Clair Hospital, but we request a restructuring of the event leadership. A humanitarian mission can't be built on humiliation and personal manipulation. A few people nodded in agreement. One doctor on the board even stepped closer and said gently, Thank you for standing up. Not everyone has the courage to pull back this curtain. I nodded slightly, a warm current quietly flowing through me after years of emotional frost. No one dared approach Elaine anymore. Madison slipped toward the back. Nathan took my hand and led me toward the balcony area. As we walked through the crowd, I heard the murmurs rising around the hall, is that the girl Elaine once kicked out of her house, they didn't see her worth until it was too late. Maya Cole. Nathan Cole's wife. The woman they mistook for a waitress. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them to know this time the one walking out with her head held high was me. No one else. The morning after the gala, I woke up in the red brick house on Magnolia Hill sunlight, spilling through the white curtains and filling the room with a strange new brightness. Nathan was downstairs making coffee. I stood before the mirror removing the delicate necklace he'd given me last year for my birthday. Everything around me was peaceful. No mocking laughter. No scrutinizing glances. Just me whole. Before 8 a.m., the phone began buzzing nonstop. Messages of congratulations, messages filled with regret and long-winded apologies from those who had once turned their backs on me during my father's funeral. My cousin Jared texted last night. It was just a misunderstanding. Aunt Linda sent a floral card to my gallery with a note that read, "If only I had understood you better." Even Brandon, the one who once called me a pathetic stepchild, left a small gift box at the hotel reception. I didn't respond. Didn't open anything. Didn't look back. 3 days later, we met Aunt Carol, my father's youngest sister, at a small cafe near Fremont. She sat tucked beside the window, hands wrapped tightly around a mug of mint tea, like she needed it to stay steady. "I'm sorry, Maya," she said right after a short, awkward hug. "I know I can't undo what I stayed silent about, but if you're willing, I'd like to start again." I didn't feel angry, just tired. Tired of apologies that came only after the damage had landed on someone else's back. "You have a son, don't you?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. "If someone ever treated him the way our family treated me, what would you do?" She looked up, eyes red and stinging. No one said anything for several minutes. I stood, leaving a small envelope on the table. Inside was an invitation to the launch of the nonprofit Nathan and I had just founded, the Thomas Whitmore Foundation, a fund for abandoned children, kids in toxic environments, the ones silenced by the very adults who were supposed to protect them. We hosted the event at the small West Wing Hall of St. Clair Hospital. No stage lights, no luxury backdrop. Just warm amber lamps, wooden chairs, and a few paintings I had done as a student hanging along the walls. I wore a pale blue dress, the color Mom used to love, and stepped up to the podium to gentle applause from the front row. Nathan stood beside me, his eyes on me the same way they were the first time we met in that tiny Seattle gallery. "I'm not here to recount the past," I began, voice steady. "I'm here to show that pain can be a foundation for compassion." A few people lowered their heads. Aunt Carol was one of them, seated beside 2 young volunteer interns. I noticed her eyes were misty. When a child is abandoned by their own family, they don't disappear. They go quiet. They observe. And they rebuild their world from broken fragments of trust. Today, we're not just launching a support fund. We're opening a door for those who survived silence and were forgotten. I looked toward the back of the room, where a little boy with messy hair clung tightly to the nurse's hand. He reminded me of myself at 8, quiet, cautious, and desperately needing to believe the world wasn't just made of people who walk away. That evening, Nathan and I walked along the Aurora Bridge, watching the city lights dance across the water. "Does it still hurt?" he asked gently, squeezing my hand. I shook my head. Not anymore. Because I stopped looking for validation in places it never existed. He smiled, resting his forehead softly against my shoulder. A week later, Elaine sent an email. Cold, like it had been drafted by a PR consultant. No apology. Just 2 lines: "I hope recent events won't affect future collaboration." Families aren't perfect, but that shouldn't ruin everything. I archived it. No reply. Family isn't defined by the name on your birth certificate. It's the person who lifts you up when the world turns its back. The one who stands by you at the launch of a foundation named after the father who never quite understood you. It's the hand that holds yours when everyone else bows their heads in regret. Family is Nathan. It's the kids learning to paint in the basement studio every Saturday afternoon. It's Aunt Carol saying yes to joining the volunteer team with the words, "I want to make the rest of it right." I used to think I needed to be seen. But no, I just needed to live with truth. The rest light finds its way. Maya's story is proof that true family isn't defined by blood, but by respect and unconditional love. Though she was once cast aside, insulted, and denied, she chose to rise, building a life with her own hands and unwavering heart. Without seeking revenge, she answered the past with compassion and maturity. Her journey inspires anyone who's ever been hurt to remember your worth doesn't lie in someone else's eyes. It lives in how you protect your own soul. What do you think of Maya's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family betrayal and the path back to yourself.